Dan.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Coffey, the evidence our Select Committee has received suggests that most people think that the waste strategy should lead to an increase in our recycling rates, but many respondents actually felt that the government's estimates for some of the policies were overly optimistic. Why are you confident that these are the right policies to lead to a 65% recycling rate by 2035?
Well, I have confidence in my civil servants, that's why.
Right. Would you like to elaborate further, or you just think that the civil servants will do that, yeah?
Well, as in, we discuss policies, we talk through what can we try and achieve. You know, there is an element of not assuming, I think, that every policy will work 100%. But even if we think about things like deposit return schemes, at the moment, collection of bottles, drinks bottles, is probably about 70 to 75%. If there's a way that we can get that up to 95%, that's a step change. If there's a way we can get greater consistency of what's collected, and there's a bit more education to be done, so people recycling their shampoo bottles or bleach bottles even, there's stuff there which people may not be aware today that they can recycle even under their current council policy, but it is this kind of opening up, and we have to make judgments with our economic analysis on what will work. And I do challenge my civil servants, I can assure you of that, because one of the two things I was probing them on, including aspects of what would happen in the difference between different kinds of bio-waste. So there's elements there on quite how much people will actually switch to having a caddy as opposed to some of the other schemes that are currently in place.
Well, you're saying that you are very confident that the government will be meeting its 2035 target, but it recently announced that it won't even be meeting its 2020 target. And in terms of recycling, so what are the reasons for that? And has the government learned
I'm
lessons?
slightly more concerned with the EU's latest starting to consider changing the rules on how you measure the 65%. I've expressed my concern to the EU, to the Commission, that having agreed the targets and the basis on which we're doing it, to now change the basis on which we're doing it feels a bit shifting the goalposts. So
you think that the remeasurement is the reason why we haven't met our targets?
Pardon?
The remeasurement is the reason why
No, that's for the 2035 target. So
what about 2020 then?
I think, we're not there yet. I think it is some of the changes in policy. We've, for quite a few decades now, we've had much more of a market-based PRN system, the packaging and recovery note system. This is now, and we've been very liberal with the TIP exemptions on what councils can and cannot do in terms of their collections. So I think that by changing these processes, I think 2020 will be tight, not denying that, unless we get a step change in councils in the next year. We've seen where people have started charging for garden waste, that collections by the district councils is falling. What I haven't yet had is the analysis on what's happening with the disposal authority, coming back to the discussion about the waste recycling centres. So some policies we're starting to see a change already, and I believe these policies will turn that around, and that we will get beyond our targets in good form as long as the goalposts stay in the same place.
Okay. Minister Sunak, in terms of local government, I find it absolutely staggering that the Local Government Association have said that they could not comment on the accuracy or the deliverability of the government's recycling targets because, and I quote, they were not involved in the development of them. Now, as the Minister for Local Government, aren't you shocked and staggered by the fact that local government, who are heading up local recycling and household recycling, that they have been completely sidelined in this way from this entire process?
So maybe there's two things that underlying the question. One around recycling targets is something that we've been signed up to long before I think either of us had these jobs, and those are EU targets that we were subject to. And there's no involvement of anyone in developing them. They're developed at the EU level, and we sign up to them, or we don't. So that's one thing. So I don't think we weren't involved in drawing up WISE. I mean, we had a voice at the committee. Maybe Therese was there, but that's that. So, but I think maybe where they also have commented on is around the financial estimates for the implementation I don't know if that's what you're also referring to as well, because that...
Many of them, they were absolutely exasperated in the sense that they have had minimal involvement in terms of the setting of the government's recycling targets, and surely as the Minister for Local Government, you should have been fighting their corner to ensure that they are involved in this process.
Yeah, so you don't know what I might be doing behind the scenes in terms of fighting local government's corner, because you'll only see a collective government position at the end of the day. But I said there was no discussion to be had about developing the targets. They were an EU set target, and we either agree to them or we don't. And we have a vote at the EU. I'm not sure if it was public or not, or how we voted. It probably is, right? So that's for the whole country. Right, and
well, in the end, we agreed to it.
We agreed to the EU target.
Doing a lot of negotiation. There was a lot of negotiation during the package, especially in the trilogue with the European Parliament and the difference between the Council, the Commission, and there. We've ended up in this particular place of 65% by 2035. I should point out that's not just about household curbside recycling, by the way. It's all municipal waste. So that includes waste from businesses as well. And there's quite a lot more that we're doing and requiring business to do in order to help us meet that 65%. It is going to be challenging. I'm not pretending otherwise. But I believe that the policies that we've agreed for consultation, and if we confirm them, I think they do give us a good roadmap in order to achieve that target.
Right. Well, the LGA have also asked that DEFRA share the data with them. Will you be doing that?
I think this is where as we're getting on to the other thing. They're asking for the data to be shared around cost assessments, not the recycling target. Right. So So. Mr. Coffey,
come on to that.
Oh, okay, fine. I said there isn't much data.
I think they were asking about how the targets themselves have been reached. As
well, it's the European Commission.
Yes.
Comes up with them initially, and then there's a negotiation between Council and the European Parliament, and that's kind of how a lot of these European targets get decided. What I don't know, Mr. Desi, is how the Committee of the Regions, on which councillors are directly represented, what engagement they had with the European Parliament or the Commission in coming up to these targets. So I'm not involved in that institution.
But on the specific question about whether DEFRA will be sharing the information, the data with the LGA, will that be the case?
I don't know which data what you are referring.
Give evidence to us, and they clearly implied that they have been working with the department in building up these figures. And indeed, when they were asked, they said, well, it's not our data to share, it's with the department. We just help the department do it. And that's a summary of what they said.
Well, I guess there's been assumptions. I don't know any reason why we would want to keep that away from the LGA. I mean, it's our assumptions on the policies, so...
well, perhaps you could go away and look what may be around, because still it was very maybe.
I don't even know if the LGA's asked us. We'll find out.
Well, then finally, in terms of the Welsh Government, in 2012, they set statutory targets for recycling that local authorities must meet, or they will risk facing fines. Now, alongside additional funding, it actually led to Welsh authorities meeting their 64% recycling target in 2017, not 2035, as is the case for England. So why are we so far behind Wales? What's the reason? How comes they're getting to 64% by 2017, and we, are struggling to get there in 16 years' time?
So I think the 64% may also include what they call incinerator bottom ash. So you need to take a couple of 2 to 3 points off that to account for that, because that cannot be included at EU levels. I think Wales, candidly, is a much smaller country than England in terms of population, but also the demographics in what percentage of people are based in kind of houses as opposed to flats. And we have a much higher concentration of people living in big urban areas than is the case in Wales. And that definitely provides more challenges on getting the recycling rates there. As I say, we had a discussion between our departments on whether we should have statutory targets for councils. Mr. Sunak can speak for himself, but I think it is that challenge of how do you end up doing targets for council areas that are really quite different. I mean, it is frustrating to me that Newham has a percentage that is less than 15%. A few miles away, you've got councils with similar demographics, similar building areas, more than double that. So I think there is more that could be done by individual councils but they don't necessarily see it as a priority to improve recycling, which I find disappointing. Obviously, have become obsessed with all this over 3 years of being the minister. But again, we have challenges in large parts of Hampshire, and I constantly challenge Hampshire as well. So, you know, it's a variety of things, and I think it's trying to set one target for every council in England, I think would be really tough.
Yeah. Well, while I appreciate what you're saying in terms of Wales being smaller and so on, but proportionately, shouldn't, you know, something is obviously going wrong if certain councils are lagging way behind, then something needs to change. So shouldn't we be looking at the Welsh approach, and is that something that you know, we either want to adopt, or are we going to be taking a similar route in England?
So, Minister Coffey come in, but I think when you say adopt the Welsh approach, I mean, one is around these statutory targets, and maybe this committee will do something that would surprise me and advocate for there being a statutory target on local authorities. Most of the time I'm with you, we're arguing that local authorities shouldn't be told what to do by central government, and indeed that was a thrust of the questioning before, and I don't think when you spoke to the LGA people you had that you were telling them that there should be statutory targets. But maybe I'm wrong, but I said that's a policy decision that we have made, and I think Minister Coffey has said she would probably be more open to more statutory targets, not at an individual council level. You know, we have tried to say that that's not necessary at this stage, and actually we can get to the same result that we all want to see through a less heavy-handed intervention. But you do raise a good point, right? The variation between similar councils is still quite significant, right? And we've had a period of time, and this is what I've been persuaded by from all the work that Therese has done. You know, I in general always want to let councils just get on with what they want, but the reality is, you know, we are trying to tackle climate change. That is going to require some collective action on all our parts, because it's something we all want to see. Getting our recycling rates up is a key part of that, and we need to do something differently, because obviously what we're doing at the moment is not good enough, right? So that's why we're having this conversation about standardisation and different streams of recycling, and yes, all of that is new and some of it is not ideal from a day-to-day convenience point of view, but we're going to have to change behaviour in order to do what we all want to do, and that's exactly why we're having this conversation. And Therese will know this better than me, but any of you can go to LG Inform or any different benchmarking website, pull up a bunch of very similar councils, you know, controls for density, affluence, deprivation, all these things, rurality, and you will see quite a significant degree of variation in recycling rates, right? So something is amiss, right? And as some people really prioritise this and do a really good job, others don't. The package of policy measures that Therese and the department have been working on, we think is a sensible package that will improve the recycling rates over time, but it gets the balance right between some central intervention but still allowing some local discretion, as we said, with something that I do care about.